All right, welcome everybody to Who's Your Band. I am Jeffrey Paul. Usually I'm joined by Sean Morton, but he's having some homeowner issues. So it'll just be me today. And I'm happy. I'm excited to be talking to our guest this week. He is a comedian, he is an actor, he is the head writer for The God's Honest Truth. He's worked on the VMAs. I've been wanting to talk to this guy for like a long, long time. So we're introducing Mr. Charles McBee. How are you, Charles?
I'm good, man. I thought you were going to get us canceled for a second when you said that your friend was having some issues. You said homeowner. You said you put the owner on it. I was like, okay, good.
Yes, he had an evacuation pump in his basement burst on him, so it's all the sewage coming up. So his whole basement, is dealing with like that crappy water and actual crap. So they're cleaning it out and fumigating, and you got to, it's a whole mess. But hopefully Sean will be dealing with that, and we'll get him back next week. But let's talk to you, Charles. But Sean said this last week, and he's right. On this show, we have ADD. Like, we bounce all over the place. Okay, so we'll start with the beginning, and then we're going to jump to different places here. So you grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and
yes.
Right? It's Toledo is. I've been out there, doing shows. It's a very like industrial part of Ohio. How did you get started in comedy? Or maybe if you even ask you why comedy, why not sports? Why not music? Why not anything else? What made you gravitate towards comedy?
Well, I am a musician. I've been a professional drummer my entire adult life. I started playing drums when I was 12. When I was 12, and then I dabbled in piano and bass. My dad's a pastor of a church. My mom's a minister, so I grew up in church, gospel music my whole childhood. So music is something that was my first love, still is. But then my second love was acting. And so I wanted to be an actor. And so that's what got me out to New York. I was going to go to LA, but I heard that you have to be trained in New York before they respect you in LA. As an actor. So I came to New York to get trained as an actor. In comedy.
At what age?
At 20, I was 25 when I came out to New York. And so comedy was something that was always a passion, or it was always a fantasy. It wasn't a passion, it was a fantasy. Because back in Ohio, I had no idea how a person got into stand-up. I didn't even know there were no such thing as open mics. There was no such thing as, we didn't have a scene. There wasn't a club back then. So I had no concept of what a comedian or a stand-up comedian does to get into being a stand-up. And so when I came out to New York, I knew that I wanted to see comedy, and I knew I wanted to go to clubs. And I always fantasized about being a stand-up comedian, but it was so beyond the pale of my imagination of reality that I just figured it was something I would probably never do until somebody told me what an open mic was. And I was like, what? Is that easy? What do you mean? You just sign up and show up and tell some jokes. So yeah, that's how I initially got into it. Somebody literally said, no, there's a comedy club right over there. Just go over there and sign your name on the paper and see what happens. This is how clueless I was. So I get to Eastville Comedy Clubs, the first open mic I had ever done.
Do you remember who the host was?
I do. This is a big part of the story. I get there and I'm waiting on the steps. This is old Eastville for anybody that doesn't know.
On East 4th Street.
Right.
East 4th and 2nd.
Yep. I'm sitting there on the steps. It's 4:00 in the afternoon. Sitting there on the steps. I got my little notes and I'm, whatever. And Jay Welch.
I remember Jay Welch
is running the mic.
Big beard, bald head. He was a funny guy.
Yep, he's running the mic, and this is how clueless I was. He comes up, says, "Hey, are you here for the mic?" I go, "Yeah," and he goes, "Okay, we'll sign up here." And I go, "Cool." And in my mind, I go, "This guy's running the open mic. he must be able to do something for my career. Like that's how clueless I was. I was like, I thought the host of the open, whoever was running the open mic, must be a big shot in comedy.
Isn't that delusional? Like how you saw things in like your first, say, year.
Yeah,
because I felt the same way. My first time also was at Eastville, and I remember thinking, man, if one day I could just be the open mic host, if I could have that skill, holy shit, would I be making it? I'm making
right.
it.
Yep. I asked this guy, and he may or may not remember this. I took a class with Jim Mendrinos way back in the day.
Yeah, he used to do it at Gotham.
Yep, that's where I took it at. I took it at Gotham.
He used to give you a homework assignment. I think it was a 2-week class where you had it like write every day for an hour.
Yep. Great teacher, by the way. He was. I think he still teaches. I'm not sure, but he's great. But I remember he had like a Q&A at the end or whatever, and I remember asking him, so if you kill at like an open mic or something like that, that could launch your career, right? Like I remember, and just the level of his eyes, if his eyes rolled any further back in his skull, like if he could, I wonder if he remembers.
What a cringy moment.
I wonder if he remembers that. And I just remember him just being like, taking a deep breath and being like, don't try and launch your career at open mic. Just do your, like, I just remember. And I remember thinking like, oh, okay, that must have been a dumb question, but it was a dumb question. And in hindsight, but yeah, the early days, fond memories.
Speaking of early days, tell the story about the first time you ever went up and did stand-up in Toledo. Because I think I read something like you told your classmates that you were out on the scene and you were killing every night. And does that story ring a bell?
Yeah, so it wasn't Toledo. Fun fact, I have yet to do stand-up in Toledo. In all my years of doing comedy, in my own little world, I don't want to go home and do stand-up until there's like a certain level I want to hit before I really go home and properly do it. It's just in my own little head.
When is that going to be? Like,
I don't know. Like I could do it now and it would be great. I think it's just something that's always been with me because home is different. It's just a different, like people say all the time, how come you don't like go home, and do a show? And it's like, because these are people who have known me since the 3rd grade. Like this is it's different. Here in New York, they know me as whatever they know me as in New York, this version of me. There, it's like, oh, there's your 2nd grade teacher. And there's this person who remember when you pissed your pants.
They really know you.
Yeah. It's just different. So I don't know, maybe I got to work it out in therapy or something. But like, there's a proper like moment where I feel like I'll go back. But anyway, so that story actually takes place here in New York. I was taking acting classes. Like I said, I came here for acting.
Okay.
I was taking acting classes and I was at a conservatory. So it was maybe about, I don't know, a few hundred, between kids and faculty. It was a few hundred of us. And yeah, so I would come in every day. And this is when, again, people were telling me, oh yeah, you should, you want to do stand-up, you do this, do that, go here, do that. But I didn't have the balls to do it. This is pre doing the open mics or anything like that.
Right, so you basically came to New York as an actor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like full on actor, was training, auditioning, like the whole nine. I got my degree actually back home in theater, in theaters, in acting and directing. So like,
hold on a second. We've been doing this interview for about 8 minutes. In 8 minutes so far, and I've known you for a while, it seems like, I did not know that you came here primarily as an actor, and I had no clue you were a drummer. Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is pretty cool. So go on. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go on with the story. So yeah, it's very, very interesting, like your background.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm going, I'm taking, doing these classes every day. We stayed in this dormitory in Brooklyn called the St. George Hotel. It's a famous hotel in Brooklyn Heights, but now it's a dormitory. And so we lived there, and then we would go into the city at the school, and we would take all these acting classes and do all these workshops and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, I was telling everybody, yeah, man, last night I was at the club. I was at the comedy club, blah, blah, blah. Oh, man, Chris Rock was there. It was like, blah.
Why are you doing this?
You said where?
Why?
Because I wanted to do stand-up. I just didn't have the balls to actually do it. So I just lied instead. I just wanted people to think that I was like, if I let me play the role of like somebody who's doing stand-up every night. And they bought it. And it was like, oh,
what
man.
Kind of shit were you telling people?
I would just be like, yeah, I was at the club. It was crazy. Chris Rock was there. He came by. It was killed. And they'd be like,
all bullshit?
Yeah, it was all bullshit. I'd never stepped on stage in my life. Never told a joke in my life. And so they would always say the same shit. How come you don't tell us? Oh, I forgot. Oh, I'll tell you the next time. And then the next time would come and I'd just be like, oh yeah, oh man, crazy. So I'm lying, thinking that I would eventually convince myself to get the courage to actually do it if I kept pretending or whatever the case. Never did. And then eventually my friend Paula, who was a manager at a restaurant at the time, who was also in the school, asked me to perform at our holiday party that she was putting on at the restaurant. This was a big restaurant. It's not open anymore, but it was a huge, like nice, plush, fancy restaurant with a big stage and everything like that. And she asked me to perform. She was like, the whole school's coming. Everybody's going to be there. It's going to be great. And I was like, listen, I'm a liar. Like you gotta, you can't put me up on that stage. I've been lying. I figured, what's the word? She's going to be mad at me. I don't care. Like, but it would pale in comparison to me actually getting on stage and making a fool of myself. And so me thinking that she would be just upset and out me to everybody. Instead, she was like, I think you're funny and I really want you to do this for me. And I was like, you're not letting me off the hook. Like, you're not just, she's like, no, I want you to do it. Please do it. I think you'll be great. And it was like I had like 2 weeks to prepare. So
how much time did you have to do?
She said whatever I wanted. I mean, it was like, it could have been 5 minutes. It could have been whatever I prepared. And so I was like, fine. Mind you, I'm sick. 2 weeks, I'm just sick. Couldn't eat, couldn't like anything. I was just so nervous.
Your first time, for people that don't know, their first time going on stage, it stresses you out. I remember the first time I went, it was also Eastville, and I remember practicing and running through, and just like as the days were getting closer, man, like you're right, you get that you're not eating it. It's all you're thinking about.
Yeah. It was dreadful, and time comes, and I'm begging her to can't take me off this thing. Like, don't make me do this. She's like, you'll be great. You're gonna be great. So time comes for the place. Place is packed. School's there. The faculty's there. And primarily they're there, I find out, not just because Paul is throwing this great party. They want to see me perform because I've been talking all this shit this whole time.
Oh, yeah, you've been hanging out with Chris Rock.
And Dave Chappelle.
Killing at the club.
They want to know what's good. They finally, this is their chance to get a front row seat to all this nonsense. So now I got that hanging over my head because they think I've been doing this for the whole time. So so she goes, when do you want to go up? Now she's got musicians and all kinds of shit going on, like perform. So she's got like
people who really do it.
Yeah, people. Yeah, people, poets. She's got all kinds of people, like performers, going up.
Are you sweating bullets this whole time at the party?
I'm sweating bullets. I can't eat. I can't do anything, and I don't drink. I don't know if you know this about me. I'll drink every blue moon, but I'm not a drinker. So people are like, "Oh, maybe you should drink something." I'm like, "No, that won't. I don't even know. I don't want anything." So I go, put me on towards the end. I'm trying to build up momentum. She's like, fine. So all these people are going up. Now the audience, the faculty, everybody, the students, they're getting irritated because it's getting late in the evening. And they're like,
and they came to see you.
Yeah. When are you going on stage? And I'm like,
I think in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, if I go at the end, maybe people leave or they'll run out of time and you'll escape it. And in the meantime, they're getting angrier because they don't want any more bullshit. They want, they don't want the dances. They want Charles McBee.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm hoping that I'll at least get the courage, or maybe the fear will go away, or the bubbles will go away. Never went away. So Paula comes up to me and she goes, look, our mutual friend Danny had a friend who was a professional comic. She invited him. I forget the guy's name. He wasn't a professional, long story short, but I don't know his name. But they go, he's a professional comic. He's been doing it a while. What if he goes before you, kind of gets them warmed up, whatever, and you just ride the wave? You see how it's done, and then you just go out and do your couple jokes. I go, okay, cool. So we go backstage, whatever the bongo player or whatever the hell is on there, they come off and he goes on and I'm back behind him. I'm like, you know what, whatever happens, happens. I got my little notes, my little whatever jokes. I'm just going to whatever. He goes out there. And when I tell you, you know, as anybody, that there's different types of bombs, right? There's there's levels to bombing. There's the bombing.
I like how you phrase it like I would know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jeff, you know all about bombing. Like when you see you out in the club and you're bombing on a nightly basis, you know about the different types of bombs. Thanks, man.
That's great. I didn't mean it that way, but that's great. That's great. As a comic, you're familiar with levels of bombing. And there's the bombing where it's like that joke's not hitting. And then there's the bombing where you're like, oh, this crowd, they're not getting it. But then there's like that bombing where it's pain, like it's
uncomfortable.
Right.
It's uncomfortable for everyone in the room. Like it's so bad you can't look at the people across from you because it's just so cringy and ew.
Yes. That kind of, he was that level bombing. So
you're not riding the wave.
There's no wave. But here's the thing. Here's how I figured it in my head. I go, because he wasn't just bombing to the crowd. It's not like I was backstage going, oh, they're not getting his stuff. He was bombing to me. I was like, this dude sucks. And if he can go out there and do this, I'm funnier than this dude. And I've never done this before, but I know I'm funnier than the stuff that he's saying out of his mouth right now. Like, it wasn't just like the jokes weren't hitting. He was saying shit that made you not like him as a person. Like, what made you think that was going to like be funny? Like that type of stuff. So anyway, he comes off stage, comes back behind stage, and I'm thinking he's going to walk immediately in front of a bus. He comes back behind stage with this huge grin, nice guy, huge grin. And he goes, that was fun. And just walks off. And I'm like,
comics are the most delusional people on the planet.
I go, if he can go out there and talk about roaches flying in his mouth because he lives in a filthy apartment and blood, whatever nonsense he was talking about, and not want to kill himself immediately after, then I should be able to go out there, do these little jokes and be fine. So there were 3-4 old ladies sitting in the front row. I had no idea who they were. They didn't know who I was. They weren't with our group. I said, I'm going to try and make them laugh. If I make them laugh, because they were horrified over what they just saw. Horrified.
How much time did he do?
He had to have done like 10 minutes, something like that. I said, if I can make them laugh, I think I'll be okay. So I go out there and I just wasn't him. And that already had me like light years. That already had the crowd on my side. The fact that I wasn't him. And I started doing, I took out my little piece of paper and I don't remember whatever jokes they were, but I started doing these jokes and I was getting a little bit of laugh and a little bit of laugh. And I look over and I see my classmates and I see the faculty and they're laughing. I do more jokes. I see the wait staff, they're laughing. And now I'm comfortable. Now I'm confident. I don't remember how much time I actually did. Maybe it was 6 minutes, maybe or something like that. But it went really well. And that's, I know it's a long story, but that's the story of how I lied my way onto the stage for the very first time to do stand-up. And after that, it was like I was like, I'm doing this now. That's the moment where I was like, no, acting, schmacking, I'm doing this.
Once you get the bug, once you get that first laugh, and all of a sudden it starts to slow down for you, right?
Yeah.
Right. All of a sudden, it's like you can't wait to get back up again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Totally.
So with the acting, you're not acting at all. I mean, are you still acting?
If something comes along, or I'll audition, but it's not I said back then, maybe I didn't verbalize it back then, but this is basically the sentiment, was I needed to pick a hustle. I couldn't hustle at, 5, 6 different things at the same time. I feel like when maybe some people can, but I feel like when most people do that, particularly me, you're just doing bare minimum at a bunch of different things. And I'm the type of person that I need to go all in on one thing, make sure that is a self, or well-oiled machine. And then I can focus on other stuff. So I decided to pick a hustle, pick a struggle. And as we say in the Black community, pick a struggle. And my struggle, I wanted it to be stand-up more so than acting, because when you're struggling at acting, the struggle is, as an artist, you just want to act and you want to be able to perform. That's what you want to do, is perform and do your craft. But in able to get to do your craft, you gotta pay several $100s for headshots. You gotta continually pay for acting classes and continually pay for training. You gotta hope to get an agent so that you can hope to get an audition. Maybe if you get an audition, even if you're good, well, his ears were too big, or it's just so much to get to the point where you can do the thing that
you're telling me.
Yeah, no, I know you know. So where you could do the thing that you want to do. And with comedy, as you also know, it's like, look, if it's nothing more than just doing an open mic, at least I can do the thing that I want to do. I can think of jokes, write it, and then immediately go and perform, if you will. So I was just like, you know what? And I loved it more as much as I loved acting. Once I got into comedy, I was just like, oh, this is I just loved it more. So I just did that full time. And I, the more time I dedicated to that, the less time I dedicated to the hustle at acting.
What did you major in college?
Acting and directing, theater.
Did you have a minor in anything?
Like communications.
Because the reason why I ask you these questions is because I've always considered you to be a very, very, very good writer, and you make your living now really writing. I mean, you do stand up, but how do you go about writing for award shows? Do you find it intimidating because you're with other writers? You're a young guy, maybe people a little bit more accomplished or who have more credits than you, and you're writing for things like the VMAs and the hip hop honors, and you're in this room with these people. How do you keep your composure, and how do you contribute creatively?
You know what? I do get nervous.
You don't show it. You never show it.
It's weird. It's like I get nervous in the sense that I just want to do a good job. I don't get nervous in the sense of comparing myself to whoever else is in the room. I get nervous. I'm my own worst critic. So I get nervous in the sense of I want to do a great job. I want to really show up and do a great job. And so I barrel in and I just lock in tunnel vision and I just do the work. I don't focus on the grandiose of whatever the project is, because it really isn't. You don't get to the spectacle until the actual day of shooting, but there's a lot of pre-pro or pre-prep that goes before that. And most of that is just, you're in a room, talking to your EP or your showrunner, and you're just writing and doing research and working on the script. So you're staring at a screen most of the time. It's not until the night of that, red carpet or whatever the case. So yeah, my whole attitude is always I just want to do a good job. And so I'm tunnel visioned in. And I'm not thinking about the bigness of it. It's just I got a document. I'm on a laptop, and I want to write what whatever it is I'm supposed to write. And with award shows, is less is pressure in the sense that it's, maybe the show is big, but it's less pressure in the sense of like, I don't necessarily have to be the most brilliant writer for an award show. Maybe if you're working on the open monologue, yeah. But if in the grand scheme of things, it's a lot of set up, just set up this next presenter, and you have to have knowledge about the different things that are up for awards and stuff like that. But it's not like you're writing Game of Thrones. It's pretty straightforward on what they want.
Is it a collective effort, or are you like assigned, hey, Charles, you're going to write for this person, yeah, and then Harrison, you're going to write for this person? Is it like that?
Yeah, pretty much. And depending on what you're working on, you might be working on, it might be you and someone else that's working on the opening monologue, or it might be, hey, we need some ideas for some sketches in between, these segments, so you're pitching sketches or somebody.
Is it a brainstorming thing?
It starts out as a brainstorming thing. And then somebody, it depending on how big the room is too. It could be a small room or a big room, but people are pitching ideas, pitching sketches.
Give us an idea of the size of the room.
It depends on the award show. So like I did the Golden.
That's budget.
Yeah, it depends on the budget. Depends on the award show. It was me for the Golden Globes. I did the pre-show. It was me and another writer, Gerard, who was basically, he doubled as writer and producer, or floor producer. And I was a writer, and like I wrote most of it. And I would report directly to my showrunner. She would tell me yay or nay, and then she had to report to the network. And the network is really where the buck stops. And so They basically, they're gonna, take their red marker, change this, change that. We can't say this, can't say that. You make those changes, and it's pretty straightforward. It's less room for, like I said, being super creative and super funny and all this kind of stuff. And it's more like you're at the behest of whatever the network wants. So
that's kind of rough. You're one of the smartest writers in terms of like what's happening current affairs wise, what's happening in current events. Do you follow the news closely, or are you writing from like what you see, like from your perspective?
A little bit of both. So with the show that we do now, so with God's Honest Truth, for that format, we do follow what's going on in the news and follow what's going on in pop culture, particularly how it affects, the Black community, because we're coming at it from that lens. But in general, I still kind of follow what's going on. Just from my own thing. I came up on Bill Maher, on The Daily Show, the Jon Stewart version, on Colbert Report. Like those were my that was kind of my trajectory in college. That was like something I knew I kind of wanted to do.
Those were your influences.
Those are my influences in college. I would watch The Daily Show every day. I would watch Colbert Report every day. I would watch Bill Maher all the time. And I just thought that it was so cool that they could take something as boring or mundane as politics and make it palatable for, somebody like me, like a young college student, or somebody that you wouldn't necessarily be watching, CNN all day or something like that. And so, and I'm a fan of satire. I've always been a fan of satire. I've always been a fan of just smart humor that kind of, it doesn't necessarily have to be about politics, but just commenting on whatever is happening. And since politics is something that could be considered, it's something that's considered as what's happening. It's a big part of our lives, but it could be, something that's just happening within the Black community, or something that's happening between men and women, just whatever's permeating in the culture, being able to kind of comment on it and kind of in a satirical way. I've always been a fan of that in general.
It's amazing how really the world has changed in what we kind of like focus and use as our identity. It used to be kind of like people's professions sometimes with their identity. Now it seems like really since 2015, 2016, since that election period, it really seems like politics and, now more than ever have become people's identity, and to the point where it's like crazed. You mentioned writing for The God's Honest Truth. You guys really knocked it out of the park and went viral with the Kamala Harris clip. It's still fascinating, string of events that you guys. This is what I liked about that, is that you guys asked questions and didn't back off. And what was that? What was that kind of like? I mean, how do you guys? I mean, it's like you and Charlemagne, and I guess the others. How do you guys have the balls to talk to the vice president of the United States? And I mean, I just recently watched it because I knew we were going to interview you, and I'm watching Charlemagne there, and I swear, man, every time I've watched it, I couldn't be more proud of. I mean, he's not a professional journalist, but he was the most professional journalist I've ever seen. That he didn't back off.
Yeah,
he didn't back off, and he kept his poise, and he asked the vice president of the United States these questions. Take us through that a little bit.
Well, I mean, a lot of that credit has to go to Charlemagne, because that's just who he is. The thing that's great about him is that with the Breakfast Club, let's take the Breakfast Club, right? They became popular not based on the guests that they got to come to the show. They became popular based on just the content that they were putting out. And so the audience really gravitated towards them, Charlemagne in particular. And so because they had the audience, politicians and artists and whoever knew they needed to come by there, because that's where the audience was and that's where the culture is. And so he's not really somebody that's accustomed to feeling like he needs to behave a certain way in order to appease this political person or appease this person. He's like, no, he serves his audience. And so whatever political person, it doesn't matter if it's the president. Obviously, he's had tussles with presidents.
Did you see eye to eye are you in line with Charlemagne? With the way he kind of sees things?
A lot of it, yes. There's some things that we disagree on. But in general, yeah, we see eye to eye on a lot of things. Because I'm not a Republican. I'm not necessarily a Democrat. I would say I've been a Democrat my whole life, but as of late, I don't claim either side. I'm somewhere in the middle, depending on the topic. And he's the same way. Depending on the topic, he'll lean more conservative. He'll lean more liberal. In general, I think he roots for liberals or roots for Democrats. But as of late, he's been very disappointed, not to put words in his mouth, but this is what he says. He's very disappointed in how the Democrats have kind of been
seeing that with guys like Bill Maher as well.
Yeah, exactly. So we're kind of aligned in that sense. There may be specific things that we may disagree on or debate about, but even that, he likes, debate. He likes different thoughts and different points of view. And so that's how we approach things. But with Kamala, so when she came on, his basic thing was, I have these questions, and and he wants to ask it, and he's not. That's just who he is. He's not really, someone who got to where he is by falling in line and following the rules, if you will.
I showed so many people that clip when Simone Sanders pretends that they can't hear you. I've never seen that in an interview with someone of that level. And Charlemagne, just again, man, like a bulldog. I like when he turns. I don't know if he's talking to you, but he turns they can hear us. Yeah. They can hear us, and he's like it just called them out. I love that.
Yeah. At the end of the day, he'd rather, and me too, we'd rather go out knowing that we were honest and there was just no bullshit.
It lends to your credibility.
Exactly. And, if it ruffles some feathers, That's fine if we know that we were sincere. Our thing is we don't do anything, and particularly him, we don't do anything for shock value. We don't do anything trying to, for clout. It's just pure, uncut, honest. Here it is. And however it lands is how it lands. But, we didn't go on there saying, hey, we're going to piss off the vice president. Like that, when that's the intent, people can see through that, and you come off as right. You lose all credibility. That was never the point. Like it was like we have these questions, they can feel how they feel, but we're going to ask the questions, and we're going to, because we want the answers.
It's the reason why someone like Brian Stelter is so hateable, is because it's contrived.
Yeah.
It's not real. It's not honest.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any plans for like the next season to interview maybe Pete Buttigieg or even like Christian Cinema or something like that? Other people like that who are in the news that would be kind of like, controversial and kind of alluring?
Definitely. Yeah, we definitely are.
And would they be hesitant to come on the show?
It's funny with what I've learned being kind of on this side of it is that, one, politicians have way thicker skin than they kind of let off. They are not as fragile as their handlers may make them seem. And so if we are where the audience is, or if Charlemagne is where the audience is and culture is, and where their demographic and their constituents are, they're gonna come. Even if we ruffle their feathers, I feel like for the most part they'll still make their way. They still do the Breakfast Club. They still, maybe certain ones. I don't know if Joe Biden will ever interview with him again because of the whole thing, but.
I don't think it has to do with that. I just don't think they would trust him to go on that type of free flow format. You would be a great guest on that show. I think current Mayor Eric Adams.
Yeah, totally.
Because he's a guy who I think can go either way. And what I mean by that is he can get influenced by the mob and the celebrity of the position, kind of like the way Bill de Blasio did and did nothing, or he can be a guy who could be a game changer in the city.
It really depends. I always wait, and I'm always interested because it's usually the same thing. And I do have some empathy for politicians who get into new positions, because they all go in with the same kind of fire in their belly to go in, and I'm going to change things. And then they realize how it really works. And they realize that maybe they're able to get a couple inches, but it's not going to be whatever they promised the people. And it's not going to be whatever they had in their mind. I liken it the same way to working on a television show. Like, you'll start going in like, we're going to do this and we're going to write that and we're going to do this. And by the time the network gets done with you, and by the time, standards and practices get done with you, and by the time this and that and that and this, you're lucky to get in those two jokes that you were hoping to, get on air. And so like, it's kind of the same thing. There's that old Bill Hicks joke, where it's just like, the president gets elected, and they bring him into a dark room, and they show him a film of the Zapruder film of JF Kennedy getting shot from a different angle. And then they turn to him and they go, any questions? Like, that's kind of how it is with these politicians. It's like they get in there, they see how it really is. And the only thing I don't like is that they don't come back and tell the people. Just be honest with the people and say, look, I had every intentions of doing this, this, and this, but this is what it's really like. Instead, they come up with some BS and they spin you. And so it just perpetuates the same nonsense.
It's on both sides of the aisle. If you really think that they have our best interest at heart, you don't know politics.
Yeah.
A politician's primary focus is to get reelected.
Yeah.
That's it. Keep the gig. Before we get into music, one last thing. What's your whole take on the whole Whoopi canceling situation?
In general, I think it's silly and disingenuous. I don't say that agreeing with what she said. I think what she said was also ridiculous and not right.
But she's also on The View.
She's also on a show called The View.
Right. Like, which hasn't been known since Barbara Walters left
right.
to say, like, the most prophetic things. Yeah.
Like, yeah. How dare you give your view on a show called The View?
Right.
It makes them look really bad. Because one, you got rid of Roseanne for her tweeting out a joke that she apologized for. But because it was, racial and whatever the case, you completely got rid of it. No tolerance, no nothing, just done, right? Now, I always say the pendulum is going to swing the other way. No matter if you keep trying to shoot at the other side and blah, 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 is going to come back your way. So now you have this case where Whoopi says something that offends a lot of people and is taken as inflammatory, whatever. So what do? Well, you don't want to fire her because that'll be a shitstorm. So you put her on a 2-week timeout, which now she's pissed about and she might quit anyway. And it makes you look like hypocrites because you got rid of Roseanne, but you're kind of doing this whole dance with Whoopi. It's just the whole thing across the board of trying to fire someone because they said something that you don't like. It's never good for anybody. Like it just isn't, Same with Joe Rogan. I don't care that he said the N-word 1,000 times. I don't listen to his podcast. I could care less. I'm not tossing and turning in my sleep because Joe Rogan made a Planet of the Apes joke. I personally don't care. It doesn't affect me at all. He should still have his dumb podcast because I'm going to say something that pisses people off and I'm going to want to keep my dumb podcast or whatever platform it is. So, yeah, Whoopi, it's not that I agree with what she said, but if you go and start decapitating everybody who says something that you either don't agree with or don't like, instead of engaging in a conversation, it just doesn't end well for anybody. I feel personally.
I couldn't agree with you more on every single thing you just said. I didn't want to see. What Whoopi said was stupid, but I don't want to see her being canceled. I don't think Roseanne should have been fired, and I don't think anyone should give a shit what Joe Rogan says or doesn't say. First of all, I'm a Joe Rogan fan, but you can't listen to the whole podcast 5 days a week. 3 hours a podcast. If I'm listening to 15% of what he says per podcast, that's a lot. There's no way I believe that a guy like Neil Young or Joni Mitchell have ever listened to Joe Rogan's podcast. Yeah. And then you're going to be such a virtue signaler that you're going to let's pull off a Spotify, but we'll continue doing business with like a company like Amazon, which has never done anything bad to people before.
The number of people and things, places and things that you would have to cancel in order to completely be rid of everything problematic. We don't want to go down that road.
That's right.
We don't. And so it's just like, shut up. I tweeted the other day, I said, every comic is just one back of the comedy club conversation away from being Joe Rogan.
I saw that.
So let's not. I've said horrific things in private that if somebody had recorded, I'd probably be canceled. Just shooting the shit with other comedians or whoever. We all have. We've all said things in the car.
That's right.
It's just, let's just be human beings and recognize that we're going to say dumb things from time to time. And if you really don't agree with somebody or don't like what someone says, you can either A, don't listen, don't watch, don't whatever, right, or you can B, engage them in better thought, in better speech. But trying to go after the sponsors and this and that is a slippery slope, in my opinion.
I think you're 100% right. Let's go back to what you said a little earlier in the show when you mentioned that you were a drummer. I had no clue that you can play the drums.
Yeah.
Funny thing is, when I was in high school, I played the drums as well. I played like in garage bands, and that's how I paid for my prom.
Nice.
Yeah. So you were. So who were your influence, and what kind of music did you listen to?
The funny thing is that drums is how I pay for living in New York when I first moved here. That's how I didn't have to get like a full time.
So you're that accomplished?
I mean, yeah, I could. Yeah, I would.
I mean, I can keep a beat, a fill every now and then, but I mean, I don't think I was that. It sounds like you like.
Yeah, no, I've been playing since I was 10 years old. Yeah, when I first when I first moved here, I knew one person.
You said 10 years old. So was there music in your house? Did your parents play music? Were they into music?
We had a organ actually when I was a kid in our house, real life organ. Somebody had gave to my dad, but no, like I said, my dad's a pastor of a church. So music and in a black church is like that's top notch. That's hand in hand. It's like a black church is music. So a lot of gospel music. I was always in church. I was always church all the time, and so I was always around it. And some church musicians, particularly black church musicians, they double as they'll play at church on Sunday, but they were at the speakeasy the night before. They were on tour with whoever, all that kind of stuff. So some of the most seasoned, best musicians are black, church musicians. And so I was just always around it. I always grew up in it. And I always had access to instruments, just being in church. My dad was a pastor. I just always had access. Oh, there's drums. I could play drums whenever I wanted. Oh, there's a piano. I could play piano whenever I wanted. And so that's how I started.
Did you ever take lessons?
I took piano lessons. That didn't last very long.
Never does with kids.
Yeah, with kids it's just not good. I self-taught on everything. Self-taught. After the lessons didn't take, I played by ear. And drums, I self-taught fully with drums.
Was there a band or a song that you heard that was that wow moment that says, I'm going to pick up this instrument and I'm going to try and play that song?
Not really. It was just a combination of being in church every Sunday and the choir singing, a bunch of different songs, and me really looking up to the same way we look up to comics or local comedians that we sit and watch is how it was as a kid watching local musicians. There were drummers and bass players, within the circuit, in that black church circuit that we as kids looked up to as aspiring musicians. So we would just all really soak up and sit and try and learn tricks and learn, chords and learn, all these things from these other seasoned musicians. And every so often, we would get to a point where we could maybe play. There were certain times of the service that they would almost like, it's funny now I'm thinking about it, similar to the check spot, with a comic. You can do the check spot. For a church service, you could do maybe offering, because offering, the offering, nobody's really paying attention. They're going around giving their money in the thing. And it's where the musicians
That's kind of great analogy.
Yeah, they can have a little jam session. Nobody, no big deal. So you could kind of get on, and if you could hang, then they will let you play offering. And so that's kind of how you kind of got in. And then every so often we would go by different the choir rehearsals and sit in on the choir rehearsals. And, maybe if there was while they were rehearsing a song or something, maybe if you could keep time, then you could get on and do that. And you earned your keep, similar to a comic. You kind of just earned your keep until you were able to get on, play a full song, and then you could play a service, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how we got into that. It was mostly gospel music that got me into it, rather than like secular music, even though I was a big fan of secular music too, but gospel music was what made me be an actual musician.
So when you were here, who did you play? What kind of music did you play?
Gospel, a lot of it.
That's gospel.
Yeah, because
who do you listen to, like in your, when you got your headphones on, or you just kind of like working out or something?
Oh, if I'm just listening to music, I live in the 90s. The great thing about streaming is that you can live in whatever decade you want and you never have to leave it. So I live in the 90s. I'm a forever 90s kid. So hip hop, I mean, it could be DMX, it could be Biggie, Tupac, or it could be, even though Aerosmith spans a lot of different decades, they had some really great music in the 90s coming up. the whole Alicia Silverstone age. I was a big part of
That's
that.
like the crazy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that
crazy,
whole thing.
right? Yeah.
Punk rock back then, I loved. All of that. Anything that was on MTV at the time is what I was basically into.
It's really like the last real good era of MTV. Yeah, I'm looking at I pulled up a chart here of 90s acts, the top 90s acts, and it's all over the place.
Yeah.
You have like bands like Nirvana, and that's why when you talked about being a drummer, Dave Grohl made it look really
one
cool.
Of the best.
Right, to play Pearl Jam. But then, you'll have in the same decade on the same charts, someone like Tupac or Beastie Boys or Dr. Dre was huge in the 90s. You had Tribe Called Quest, people forget about. Green Day, Soundgarden,
Green Day, all of it.
Did you like the crossover stuff, like stuff like Rage Against the Machine, Korn? Were you into that stuff?
I was into all of it, all of that. Rage. I was into Korn, Limp Bizkit, all the unpopular ones too. I was into those too as a kid. What was it? Queen of the Stone Age.
Faith No More.
Yeah, Gorillaz.
I liked Gorillaz was really like Blur. It kind of like a super group.
Yeah,
Blur and like I think like a rapper, right?
Yep. I forget his name, but yeah, he was a rapper. He produced a bunch of dope stuff, wrote a bunch of dope stuff. I think he's from the West Coast. Like all of that. I was in Linkin Park. I was a huge Linkin Park fan. Rest in peace to Chad. I was a huge Flea. I'm having a brain fart. One of the biggest bands ever.
Korn, Guns N' Roses in the 90s.
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Red Hot Chili. How did we leave that out?
I was having a brain fart. Red Hot Chili Peppers, all of that. And the thing about all those groups, to me, it was more so like, especially the rock groups, you could hear the instrumentation and you could hear the melody and you could hear the influences. I love the guitar riffs, the bass line. I'm a huge Flea fan. As a drummer, drummers and bass they're like married.
Well, it's the rhythm section.
Yeah. So I've always been a fan of great bass guitar players. And they weren't afraid, like you said, the future, they weren't afraid to fuse music. Like 90s was the great fusion of different styles and different acts.
Well, I think it was a little earlier then, but you had the Aerosmith collaboration with Run DMC. But you also, I think in the 90s, didn't you have what's it? Oh, I love them. Public Enemy together with Anthrax when they did Bring the Noise.
Yep, totally. Yep, Public Enemy, and even though again were they late 80s when they started?
They came out in the 80s.
80s, but still through the 90s.
But they did go into the 90s.
90s was great, yeah. And even like pop. Growing up, I was a kid, MTV, so Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, like all of it. I was just consuming all of it. It was all like great music to me. And I wasn't. There was because I grew up in Ohio, we didn't have a specific sound that we were beholden to, if you will. There was no like music scene where we were from. There was early on, like in the 70s and stuff like that. A lot of famous people came out of there, but in the 90s, not so much. And so we could just consume anything from anywhere, South, East Coast, West Coast. Like we didn't care. It wasn't like we only listen to a certain rappers or certain artists because they had this sound or that sound. We just consumed every sound from all over the country. So
speaking of great bass lines, the bass line that always stayed with me, I asked you the question about first band that really got you into like music and said, this is something I wanted to do. For me, it was the Jackson 5 and the bass line, which I could never, ever get rid of. It's the best bass line, of any song for me, is the bass line in The Love You Save.
Oh, yeah.
And is it Tito who's the bass player for them?
Tito was either guitar or I don't know, because I know they had like extra people in the band that weren't part of the five, but like played different instruments. So I don't know if Tito played guitar. I think he played or bass.
Whoever played it on that record, I should really look it up one of these days.
Yeah.
That bass line, man, is beyond. It's not subtle. It is prominent, but but the melody of the song and the catchiness of every is to me one of the best Motown era songs ever recorded, and the bass line does for me, and that made me just like really want to be into music. If you had to pick three rap groups or three rap artists that that you really kind of like still listen to, like it never gets old, who you going with?
Probably some of the go-tos. They're probably not going to be. I'll try and pick some other than Biggie, Pac, and Jay-Z. But those are they're there for a reason, other than them, Big Pun never gets old to me. DMX never gets old to me. Big L never gets old. So probably those would be my not underground, but those would be my second tier. And the top tier would just be with Jay-Z, Pac, and Biggie.
Were you a Nas fan?
I was a Nas fan, but if I'm being really honest, his best album was his first album. It was written. Every album after that, to me, still had great songs, but as bodies of work, I wasn't as big of a fan as his later bodies of work. I think the beat selection wasn't always the best. He's always been a top tier lyricist, but beat selection and production to me has never matched the first album where he had, everybody, just the top of the top on there making that album. And I feel like people like Jay-Z, where he really shines is he's always worked with the best of the best when it came to production. He didn't just rely on his own lyrical capabilities to carry an entire album. And I think that's where Nas should have I think that's where that would have did him more justice if he had have kind of still stayed in tune with whoever, not necessarily the hottest, who's ever the hottest producer, but just producers that could really help match his level of lyricism. If his lyrical abilities are up here, then whatever producers he's working with should also be up here.
What's pretty cool? Remember in the 90s on MTV, I wish they would bring it back. They used to do Unplugged.
Yeah.
And remember when they had LL Cool J and he comes out with that band and he does an unplugged version of Mama Said Knock You Out?
Yeah.
Do you remember how great that was?
Those were amazing. Those were those moments where, it was pre-YouTube. So you had to really look for those moments. And when they came on, you were glued to your seat because it was just like, you couldn't go to an LL concert. So something like that came on. It was like, what? That's why the VMAs were so big back then. You get to see your acts perform. It's like, what? I get to see so-and-so perform. Now it's great that we have access to whatever we want, but at the same time, it takes away those magical moments, those must-see moments when it comes to like television and things of that nature. Because you just go, I can see anything I want, whenever I want. But yeah, those are great.
But that was how you knew it was a great song, because when it's scaled down and stripped down, and it's a guitarist, it's a bass player, and it's a drummer, and LL is up there rapping, and that was so across. I thought it was across generations. I thought it was cross racial. I thought it really was like that was like. I didn't care who you are. You had to like that and appreciate that. I'm a rocker guy. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And it never got old for me. You know what else? Do you remember? And this guy from the 90s, you don't hear from him anymore. Remember Coolio? And he had that duet with I don't know who the guy who sang the singing part on
Dangerous Minds.
Yeah, on was that Gangsta's Paradise?
He's a guy.
I get him mixed up with Coolio, not Coolio, CeeLo Brown.
CeeLo Green, I think.
CeeLo Green, right.
But that wasn't him, though.
Barkley.
Yeah. But that's not who sung it. Yeah, it was I forget his name, but it was like a regular guy.
He was great.
I don't think he hasn't sung anything or done anything else, but like,
how's that happen?
He's I think Coolio just kind of knew him, or he was like either in the studio, he was just around in the studio, and like they just put him on the song, and it became this like amazing song. That song though is funny because going back to like me loving everything, that song is one of those songs that became so popular, but it was popular for, the movie Dangerous Minds, and it's Coolio. And so in a way it became this thin line it walked between popular and corny. And at least in the Black community, it was like they knew it was a great song, but it wasn't really hardcore. So
no, because that was also the time you had some gangster rap coming out.
Exactly.
It was NWA and particularly Ice Cube, and then Dre was changing the scene. Right. So that was considered like I guess I'm gonna call it like top 40 rap.
Yeah. Soft, and it was like so it was like this weird like even now, like I'll still bump it to this day, but it's just like I'm kind of looking around like oh, my neighbors hear me just bumping Coolio. But it's a great song. You can't deny when a song is just an amazing song. It
dude,
won the Grammy that year.
I get it because like my favorite bands are Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden. But if I'm driving in my car and no one's around, I may throw a little ABBA in there, a little SOS.
There you go.
I kind of like that. No one's gonna catch me, right?
There you go. Yeah. You know what? You might end this whole stream down after this. But I am what's the band everybody hates but pretends to hate?
Nickelback.
The go-to punchline. Nickelback.
Yeah.
I don't hate Nickelback.
Because you have a brain and you don't follow. That's right. Nickelback, How You Remind Me, Photograph. They have some really good songs.
Like, what is the big deal?
Yeah. Knew who makes it a punchline? Hacks.
Yeah. It's like, bro, I'm like, I never could understand. And I make a joke about this on stage that I'm a Coldplay fan, which I am. I love Coldplay. But yeah, Nickelback, I'm like, I grew up like either the song is good or it's not. I always love when people make fun of a band and they go, they're the worst band ever and they suck and nobody likes them. I'm like, really? They sold over 100 million albums. I assure you, somebody likes them. Like,
yeah, I would like to be in a band like that. What do you think about the first time you heard "Smells Like Teen Spirit"?
I was young, but I remember it being something that I just knew was like one of the dopest things I ever heard. And I've always had it, even before I knew I was a musician, I've always had an ear for music. I always say, like, even as a kid, I could have been a top 40 DJ. I could have broke hits because I knew a hit when I would hear it. And I remember hearing.
Did you ever think about working for a record company?
What's that?
Did you ever think about working for a record company?
Not once I was an adult, but as a kid, I thought I was going to be a musician in some way, a professional musician in some capacity, whether it be a record label or something like that. That was my kid kind of goal.
That was my first job out of college.
That was your first job?
Yeah, I worked for CBS Records. I worked in the A&R department.
Yeah, see that? Yeah, I figured, I was like, maybe I'll be, as a kid, you have the, whatever. So I was like, I don't know. Will I be a rapper? Will I be a musician? Will I be this or a producer? Something like that. But those were kind of like the fantasies I would have as a kid. But Teen Spirit, it was because you got to remember it was simultaneous with the music video back when music videos meant something. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't even just a song, even though the song was amazing, but it was seeing that music video and seeing Kurt Cobain and seeing that, like, it was a whole, it sucked you into the TV and it held you there and it didn't let you go until the video was over with. And you're just there in your living room going, what the fuck was that? Like, that is incredible. Nirvana was a shit. Like, Nirvana was definitely the shit.
it killed the hair metal bands. Bands like Judas Priest and Motley Crue went from playing, Madison Square Garden to playing, like the Palladium or the Beacon Theater. Charles, this hour flew by, man. Really flew by. You were great. Before we wrap this up, what do you got coming up, and what can people look forward to in Charles McBee world?
There's a few things in pre-pro that unfortunately if you follow me on at Charles McBee on Instagram and social media, and everything that I'm not allowed to talk about now, I'll be allowed to talk about in the next month or a couple months or so. So please follow me there. And and that's where I'll be kind of announcing a bunch of stuff.
Guys, follow Charles McBee. Maybe Adam will put up some graphics when this comes out, and we'll have all Charles' social information. Charles, I can't thank you enough, man. You were excellent. You were great.
This is great. This is fun. I love talking music. This is great.
No, man, it was really, really great having you on. We appreciate it, and I'll see you around New York.
See you.
Okay, take care, man. Thank you very much.
Peace.
Bye-bye.